Rizvi is not here, so yeah, this is the reason that we are agile now. Yes, I can
Yep.
give Canva.
So can you see the screen?
Yes, you are sharing the Canva, but it's not in a presentation mode. It's just, yeah, we see
Okay,
the
so
slides.
let me move it in presentation mode quickly. Presentation mode.
You have
Okay,
in
give
the
me one
right
second.
corner down
Yeah,
full
no,
screen.
I have many windows open,
Many
so
windows, yes.
I need to know which one to open without sharing more. Okay, let me get again to the meeting and one pin second, and now I will try again to share. So I think now it should be better. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So there is some part of Agile that I would like to share with you. And I know there were different conversations earlier about the history of Agile and how Agile actually started and who had the most contribution to Agile and so on. So, through my research over the years, I reached this conclusion. Maybe I will change it in a couple of other years, but for the moment, from all the research I've done, it points out that Agile started indeed with the statistics work of Mr. Walter Schulhart, and he was the mentor of the later one, Edward Deming, which you were all familiar, the PDCA cycle. So they were both of them mathematicians, statisticians, and then Deming was also working, and of course was the main figure at Toyota in Japan, and all his work was for improving actually processes and for improving management ways of working. So when he started to work in Toyota, he was actually coming to train managers on how to react and how to interact with teams. So it was not coming from this, let's say, very process oriented or efficiency oriented, which later on Lean Six Sigma became. And yeah, you are all familiar about the PDCA cycle, and this is the PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act. And this is guiding most of our agile world in these years. And nothing has much changed actually from the 50s, 1950s till now. We are still guiding by the PDCA. We are still improving and iterating and improving and so on. Other remarkable agile projects and agile work, which can be now defined as agile, because just like our previous speakers were saying, not everything had the name branded into them as agile in that time. So people were just doing different improvements, or they were doing software delivery, as later on Dr. Winston Royce at IBM wrote the paper Large Software Systems. So they were not necessarily defining agile as such, but more a way of working in a collaborative way, in getting feedback, in getting some full iteration of a product. So then you have something to analyze, discuss, and show to your stakeholders and members of other part of the organization. And then I would say that this particular point, it emerged later on when we had the, of course, Agile Manifesto for Software Development particular, but the way Agile was understood in those years was building on iteration, showing complete work in front of the customer, and introducing lots of other concepts, which by that time they were not so visible, as testing, lots of testing, customer voice in the way you are defining requirements. And this was something that Dr. Winston introduced. In this presentation, I wanted to show you, of course, you also mentioned, couple of you mentioned already that you cannot manage what you cannot measure, and this is Lord Kelvin, is the guy actually with the absolute temperature. And yeah, it's so needed in our organization to actually know when you start to measure something. It's not even starting with a measurement. It just starts with what we want to achieve. What is the value that you would like to achieve? So then in the end, what is the problem that you want to solve? So then you will know what kind of measurement you want to input there. Because over the years, Agile has developed many KPIs, and there were some presentations that were going into this level of KPIs earlier, and I will say to you from my own experience that the KPIs are very much needed from different parts of the organizations and different layers of understanding how organization works. So for some executives, for example, for the sponsors, for the executives, for top management, the KPIs are more translated into how the organization is making money, how we are building this return on investment, what is our strategic goal in the next years, like what will be the customer customer value and what we will put in front of other competitors. So those are the KPIs that you can guide yourself when you speak to management. But on the other hand, when you work with your agile teams and with your product managers and product owners, you will see that the KPIs are much related to the product itself, like customer satisfaction, net promoter score, churn rates, different technical KPIs as well in terms of frequency of deployment, change to failure, and so on. So and then you can have your KPIs at the level of the team as well, because those KPIs at the level of the team, such as velocity or burn up, burn down charts, those will be very specific to your team always, because when you try to standardize velocity in a company, you will see that it's a very difficult exercise. You cannot just standardize random story points across many types of teams, because the work is so unique to them and they cannot just think in the same story points. What is taking for some team to define a very critical task and it's 10 story points, maybe for the other ones it's 5 story points. So then you would be comparing apple with pears. And in this presentation, I will be talking more about the software productivity and the software development, because nowadays when we have AI riding this change, because we are just partnering as a understanding the AI movement all over the organization, and we want to embed AI in the overall organization. I think we also need to be aware of what exactly the software engineers and software developers are doing and how we can actually support them in their day-to-day work as project manager, as agile practitioners, because we need to see the bigger image that is created inside an organization, bigger than our backlogs, bigger than our Jira board. So then when this software developing is also one component, is impacting, let's say, operations, is impacting onboarding, marketing, sales, etc. So everything in the end is connected to a huge ecosystem, which you as project managers and agile practitioners need to understand and need to see it. Yeah, and I have a couple of myths about the software development, and I think they are not necessarily, when you look through them, you see that they are not necessarily related just to software productivity. The same for us in project management, it can be more metrics, right? We were just discussing earlier about the value, and the value is in the eye of whoever is looking at us and our work. So it's very subjective thing to measure value, and that's why you cannot have just one metric. For sure, they are not just for the manager. So when we talk about different ways to calculate and different ways to measure backlogs and the work done by the software engineers is not for our benefit, is to understand how we can actually, what we can learn from their work, what we are doing good, because there are also very good things that we are doing, and where are there some gaps that we want to improve. And then we look overall in the entire organization, and we will see that, let's say, a failed change now, when we try to put it in production, would have had a negative consequence on somebody that was waiting for this change from HR, for example, right? So then we need to see how things are connected. And yes, they are definitely not only about the system and the tools, and they are not the measure of control like micromanagement. Yeah. In my experience, some of these technical teams that I work with, they were resistant to agile ways of working, because somehow in agile way of working, you need to be very close to the team. You need to understand them. You need to support them. There is this entire idea of servant leadership and so on. And somehow there is a very thin line that might be crossed and might be even misperceived, as you might be micromanaging them. So be careful in your day-to-day interactions with your agile teams, because in your effort to help them and to make them autonomous, they might take you for a micromanager. And I wanted to talk to you about the DORA. This is the DevOps Research and Assessment. It started years ago in 2014. Those creators that you see there, they were all working for smaller companies, which in the end, they were acquired by Google. And it started with this idea, like how we can measure software productivity. Because in the beginning of those years, 2010 and so on, people started to make this concept of DevOps, so to merge these two different teams inside the organization, and also to see how software development can be actually creating value beyond the exactly working software, right? And it's not a very easy concept to measure, just like is our project success, for example. It has so many different nuances and perspectives. The same is with the software productivity. And they were running different reviews, different surveys, and they were going through different companies with this survey to understand how technical teams are working in this software development life cycle. So what kind of deliverables and what kind of KPIs and what kind of issues they have in the end at each stage of the software development cycle. And they discovered that things were very from perspective that we have now, they were very much different and not in a good way. So some big companies like Google, for example, they had a couple of releases per year and not more than that. And now we all know about the continuous integration, continuous development, for example, and this has been developed tremendously in the past decade and more than that. So these concepts in the beginning, they seemed very much new and more like some, let's say, completely new and also unrelated to day-to-day work, because this is what is happening whenever you create something new and you want people to follow it. There is always this adoption phase, and you would have those early adopters, and then you would go through a Gauss curve, and in the end will be the maximum adoption of this change, and then later on will succumb. Yeah, right. You will have the laggards. So the same happened with Dora. They started to analyze this, and they started to think that, okay, we need to understand the software development, and therefore, if you think about software development in those ages and what we have now, there is a continuous agile transformation coming from the software development. And they realize that everything is connected actually to the culture of the company, to the support that they have from management, and also very, very important thing that I think nobody said it before, it was also the satisfaction of those teams, their happiness to create this work, right? And what they have to do, how they are supporting in creating their work. And I know you love metrics. I also love them. We were talking even in a panel discussion with ladies that we need to know metrics. We need to know our data. So in terms of software development, and think about it, this DORA, you can easily apply and integrate it in your entire agile lifecycle, because this DORA doesn't apply necessarily to just software. When you look at these metrics, and you would see that, okay, we talk about deployment frequency, we have lead time to change to failure rate, and so on, time to restore a service. These are not just software development metrics anymore. They can be easily transferable to other departments as well. So when you look overall, this might be very useful for you to decide on some particular KPIs that you want to show to your management to drive those agile change and those agile adoption. Of course, you don't need to start with all of them in parallel, because for sure it will be a very hard work to start to measure everything in the same time. You would not have the data probably from where to collect this data to start measuring, and every metric here, every KPI here has a dimension and also has different perspective in organization. Because when you look, for example, let's see, this deployment frequency, yeah, like it refers to how often the organization actually manages to deploy successfully in the production system, right? So when you think about it in this way, I want you to just stop and think about it. To do a really good deployment for any organization, you need many departments to function together. And it's not just the software development that is part of this organization. So when you think about your definition of done in terms of agile, you need to think bigger. You need to think from this entire ecosystem that you are part of, and also your team is building up and changing this ecosystem. And what I mean by ecosystem is your organization, because when you do a change in production, or when you put together a new product, yeah, that the team has done before, like the organization did not have this product, you impact a lot of those other departments, not just your agile, let's say, and your project team. So you need to think about it. Who will work with the product? How will be integrated? How you will measure the success of this product overall? How you will deal with any incidents? How you will train people? How you will do communication for the release of the product? When exactly this product will be integrated? Will there need to be other systems to communicate? You will need to decommission some other system just because this product is taking over some of these things. So you see, there are all sort of questions and sides of the things that you need to assess before you even decide, okay, that's the definition of done, or yeah, do we still need to come to discussion again, or do we need to actually talk with another team to look at our definition of done and see if it's done or not? So take your time to understand your organizations and to see them as a whole mechanism where you actually build different parts, and all these parts are moving, and they are moving in their own speed and with their own learning capabilities. Because one team, for example, in marketing, or one team in HR, would move in a completely different speed and rhythm than one team that is very technical and knows how to deal with some changes and knows how to work with some different tools and so on. So think about all these pieces of puzzle that in the end they need to come together, right? About this DORA metrics, when you look at them at this very holistic view, I think they are very good, and you can actually go and maybe play with them and see how people will react to them, and just start to have those conversations and see how they feel about changing those regular KPIs that we usually have on our teams. I'm thinking now here that together with DORA, those other good metrics that could be measured here, they are the ones from Kanban. And you know that Kanban is working well, maybe not alone, maybe combined with Scrum, but it has some very good mindset behind it. And the mindset of Kanban actually came also from Toyota. So you see, Agile for me is Toyota, but yeah. And it is about limiting the work in progress in Kanban, right? And it's limiting how it's actually concentrating on what we put as the outcome, the throughput, right? So you always need to measure what is in progress and what will be the outcome. And in the same time, with Kanban, you would have those different swim lanes where you need to move the tickets because they are either just started, blocked, finished, and so on. So that gives you some flow, and this flow is very important. And the flow is also one of these um, one of these other frameworks that I researched in my connection to Agile and to AI. And the flow actually is one of these very important perspective in the software development, because there is an entire theory about it. And this theory started somewhere in the 70s to study the flow and to study the friction. And what is meant by friction is all these other priorities and work that we are asking our developers to do that has nothing to do with the development itself. And when you ask them to do a specific report or to come to a meeting that was not planned, or you ask them again why this decision was taken like this, or you ask them to fill the Jira ticket, think about your actions all the time and think about that you are actually limiting and impacting and disrupting this flow, and you create friction, and this friction will have an impact on the quality of the work that they are doing. So when you think about it, and it's so easy to understand it, and it's so easy to relate it to other work that we are doing in general, yeah, for any company, you see how these two different frameworks, the Dora and the Space, it can be so easily adaptable to any other of kind of initiative and department in the end, because we do, like, look at this space, for example. You have satisfaction and well-being. Who doesn't want to have satisfaction and well-being in their teams? This is very, very much aligned to agile mindset, right? That you create autonomous teams and they are working together, and in the end you will be actually detaching yourself from these teams. They will be independent, right? So you will just make them so good and so knowledgeable and stand alone on their own feet, integrated in the organization, knowing about the business needs, that you will not be needed there anymore. And this is perfectly fine, because in the end the overall goal of agile is to have autonomous teams. And another important metrics of space, you see them here, the performance, the activity, and so on. And I just want to say that space was used for GitHub, and that's how it started, this research on the space. And the guys working there were working at GitHub. And you know that in the, I mean, you know that now basically everything is, every little version of the code, it goes through GitHub, and it became such an important application for software development and for our agile teams, yeah, GitHub. And here is just an extract from the other space research, and they go very much. So I encourage you to go and study about the space research and to see more and more of those different KPIs that they are looking for. And because it will give you some more understanding of actually how you need to communicate, what kind of questions you can ask your agile teams, and also what kind of metrics you would have for these teams and how they will be reported higher for some executives, for example, yeah. And there is also this McKinsey way to analyze software development productivity. This is also based on the Dora and Space metrics, and then they came with their own structure and vision and research on those. So you will see those, I don't know if you make the difference, but these dots that are more blue, they are the ones that are referring to the this McKinsey research, and they added the concept of what is known now as inner and outer loop. And inner and outer loop it's not such a very different and very new concept. It's also coming from this friction, limiting friction and limiting actually time spent outside of the software development activities. And yeah, you see here, this is the inner loop, basically what you expect and what people actually, not, any type of organization would expect that the software developer and the engineer is doing. Most of the time they are doing the code reviews, they are building the code, build and test, and the other outer loop, they are the meetings, integration, deployment at scale, and research, etc., etc. And I mean, by them, I meant McKinsey, their understanding was that to be successful at the software productivity, you should spend more time in the inner loop and limit the time of outer loop. And because of this way of seeing software development, they received a lot of criticism actually from the software developers themselves and other engineering managers, because in our day-to-day work, we all know that in the end, software developers and engineers are not doing just those activities listed there. And there cannot be such a harsh delimitation between what is inner, what is outside loop. And in the end, the things are not, in the end, they are not so white and black. It needs to be a gray area where actually people are still communicating, still collaborating, still spending time in some meetings and research a lot, especially now with AI. There is a lot of work to be done around testing the credibility of what AI is actually producing, especially as the software developers, because even though AI can help, and there is an entire concept of vibe coding. I don't know how many of you are familiar with vibe coding. If you are familiar, just type in comments and so on and tell me if you know about it. This vibe coding is actually the idea of you don't need to know any coding and you don't need to write a single line of code to produce any code, because AI, guess what, will just do it for you. Well, things are not working like that in real life, and there are still a lot of intervention needed from the engineers. And I think this inner loop of what McKinsey called, I think now we do have a lot of AI activities in this side of the inner loop, just because on one hand, organizations, they want to go fast and integrate different new technologies, and on the other hand, just like with any change, it takes time, and it takes a long period of time till people will actually work it in an efficient way and integrate it in the culture of that company. So there you have it. So I'm gonna stop here. If you're interested in this kind of work and this kind of discussions, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I will drop it again in the chat. So I'm happy that I made this quick presentation for you, and I hope you learned something new. So thank you.
Thank you, Magda, for stepping in. And if you have questions for Magda, please, you can put it in the chat. She will be